Chapter 1. A Mysterious Disappearance. It was on an unseasonably warm September afternoon that I, Captain Arthur Hastings, found myself seated opposite my dear friend, Hercule Poirot, in the drawing-room of his London apartment. Poirot, as ever, was the picture of meticulous order, his perfectly waxed moustache twitching as he carefully aligned a porcelain cup with the saucer beneath it. "Mon ami," he said at last, tapping a delicate finger against his temple, "I fear that I am in danger of growing complacent. The mind, Hastings, is like a well-trimmed garden. Neglect it, and soon it is overrun with weeds." I smiled at his characteristic metaphor. Surely, Poirot, London is never without its fair share of intrigue. He gave a small sigh, stirring a single sugar cube into his tea. "Ah, but intrigue and true mystery, those are different matters entirely." As if summoned by some unseen force, the arrival of a visitor broke the afternoon lull. Miss Felicity Margrave, a pale and anxious young woman, was ushered into the room. She bore the unmistakable air of someone burdened by an unspeakable worry. "Mr. Poirot, I hardly know how to begin," she faltered, sinking into a chair. Poirot steepled his fingers and inclined his head. "Begin at the beginning, mademoiselle. You are distressed. Voilà, this much is evident. Tell me everything, and we shall see what order may be made from disorder." Miss Margrave drew a shaky breath. "It's my cousin Violet. She has vanished, without a word, without a trace. And I fear something dreadful has happened to her." I started in surprise. "Vanished? When?" "3 days ago. We were to attend a soirée at Lady Wetherby's estate, but she never arrived. She left her townhouse in Mayfair in the afternoon, alone, and was expected to meet us later that evening. But she never came. No one has seen or heard from her since." Poirot's eyes glittered with sudden interest. "And this cousin of yours, mademoiselle, she is the wealthy Miss Violet Everleigh, n'est-ce pas? The heiress to the Everleigh fortune?" Miss Margrave nodded miserably. "Yes, the newspapers have begun to speculate, but no ransom demand has been made. The police are convinced she has eloped." Poirot's lips pursed. "And you do not share this conviction?" "Absolutely not. Violet was no fool, Mr. Poirot. She was independent, certainly, but she would never disappear without informing me. We were like sisters." Poirot regarded her for a moment, then nodded briskly. "Bon, the case interests me greatly. A young heiress vanished into thin air, and the authorities leaping to a convenient conclusion. No, there is something more. Here, something unseen." He turned to me with a gleam of excitement in his eye. "Hastings, prepare yourself. We shall pay a visit to Miss Everleigh's townhouse at once. The game, as they say, is afoot." Chapter 2. The Empty Townhouse. Miss Felicity Margrave led us to the imposing residence of Violet Everleigh, a grand cream-coloured townhouse on the corner of Berkeley Square. The building loomed in the dimming afternoon light. Its tall windows shuttered its air curiously lifeless. A uniformed maid, her face drawn with worry, admitted us into a vast marble-floored entrance hall. Poirot removed his gloves with meticulous care, his sharp eyes flitting from the ornate chandelier to the fresh-cut lilies on a side table. "Tell me, mademoiselle," he said, turning to Miss Margrave, "who resides here besides Miss Everleigh?" "No one," she replied. Since her father's passing last year, Violet has lived alone, save for the staff. Ah, and les domestiques. Where are they now? The butler, Mr. Carson, and the housekeeper, Mrs. Atkinson, are still in residence. The other servants come during the day but leave at night. Poirot nodded and gestured toward the parlour. Let us sit. We shall discuss what we know before we examine what we do not. Inside, the room was a picture of understated luxury. Polished mahogany, fine silk upholstery, and an elegant writing desk positioned beside a bay window. But Poirot's gaze was fixed elsewhere. He moved toward the mantelpiece, adjusting an ornament slightly before speaking. Now, mademoiselle, you say that your cousin was last seen 3 days ago. What do you know of her movements on that day? Miss Margrave clasped her hands. She had an appointment in the morning with her solicitor, Mr. Griffith, regarding her inheritance. After that, she was to have luncheon with Lady Weatherby, before returning home to dress for the evening event. The maid saw her enter the house around 3 o'clock. Très bien. And then Miss Margrave hesitated. That is where the certainty ends. The maid left at 5, as usual. Carson and Mrs. Atkinson were here, but they both insist they did not see her again after she arrived. Poirot's brows lifted. Comment: the lady of the house vanished from her own home, and no one noticed. That is most extraordinary. Hastings, intrigued, leaned forward. Surely someone heard something. Miss Margrave shook her head. The house was locked as usual when the staff retired. The next morning, when Mrs. Atkinson went to rouse her, Violet was simply gone. Poirot steepled his fingers. And her bedroom? Was anything amiss? The bed was untouched, her evening gown still laid out, her jewellery undisturbed. Sapristi! Poirot exclaimed. A lady does not dress for an engagement, does not pack a bag, does not take so much as a hairbrush, and yet she disappears. Nom, something here does not make sense. He turned to me abruptly. Hastings, we must see the bedroom at once. Upstairs, the room was as Miss Margrave had described, pristine, undisturbed. Poirot moved slowly, his gaze sweeping over every detail. He paused by the vanity table, lifting a silver-backed hairbrush, then inspected the wardrobe, where rows of fine garments hung undisturbed. Then, with a small exclamation, he bent over the floor near the writing desk. "What is it?" I asked. Poirot straightened, holding up a single golden cufflink. "A gentleman has been here, Hastings, and I do not think he was expected. Hastings, and I do not think he was expected." Miss Margrave paled. Violet was not courting anyone. Poirot's expression was unreadable. Perhaps not, mademoiselle, but someone was here, and I fear that whoever it was did not mean your cousin well. Chapter 3. The butler's account. Poirot turned the cufflink over in his fingers, his expression unreadable. He then slipped it into his pocket with a satisfied nod, before motioning to Miss Margrave. "Mademoiselle, summon the butler, if you please. I should like to hear what he has to say." Miss Margrave rang the small bell on the bedside table. A few moments later, the heavy footsteps of Mr. Carson, the butler, sounded in the hall. He entered with the dignified stiffness of a man who had served in his position for many years, his weathered face betraying only the mildest concern. "You wished to see me, sir?" "Oui, Monsieur Carson," Poirot said, fixing the butler with a keen gaze. "You have been in Miss Everleigh's service for how long?" 15 years, sir." Carson replied, "since she was a child." "And on the evening of her disappearance, you were in the house?" "Yes, sir." "As was Mrs. Atkinson, the housekeeper." We completed our usual duties and retired to our rooms at 10:30. "Did you see or hear anything unusual?" Carson hesitated for a fraction of a second. "No, sir." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And yet, Monsieur Carson, I do not believe you are a man who sleeps lightly." The butler's lips tightened. "I will admit, sir, that I heard a sound." Miss Margrave sat forward. "A sound? What sort of sound?" Carson cleared his throat. "It was some time after midnight. A slight disturbance, a creak of the floorboards, as if someone were moving about. But when I listened more closely, it ceased." "You did not rise to investigate?" Poirot asked. Carson's expression darkened. "It was not my place, sir. Miss Everleigh was a private woman. If she chose to walk about her house at night, I would not intrude." Poirot considered this. "Did Miss Everleigh ever receive late-night visitors?" The butler stiffened. "Not to my knowledge, sir." Poirot studied him for a long moment. Then, with a small nod, he turned away. "Merci, Monsieur Carson. That will be all for now." The butler bowed slightly and left the room. As soon as the door shut, Miss Margrave turned to Poirot. "Do you think he is hiding something?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "May we? A butler is trained to be discreet, but he is also a man of habit. And when habit is disturbed, it is most revealing." I frowned. "What do you mean, Poirot?" "Consider, Hastings. He hears a noise in the night, a noise out of place. And yet he does not investigate. Why?" "Because he assumed it was Miss Everleigh." Poirot smiled. "Precisely. Which means, mon ami, that whatever he heard, it was not her." Miss Margrave gasped. "Then someone else was in the house that night?" "Exactement." Poirot nodded. "And I believe we shall find our next clue with Mrs. Atkinson." Chapter 4. The housekeeper's secret. Poirot wasted no time in summoning Mrs. Atkinson, the housekeeper. A stern-faced woman in her late 50s, she entered the drawing-room with a composed demeanor. But the tightness around her mouth and the way her hands gripped her apron betrayed her unease. "You wished to speak with me, sir?" she asked in a clipped tone, her eyes darting between Poirot and Miss Margrave. "Indeed, madam," Poirot said pleasantly. "You have been in Miss Everleigh's service for how long?" 9 years, sir. Since before her father passed." Poirot nodded approvingly. "Then you knew Miss Everleigh's habits well, n'est-ce pas?" "Of course, sir." He steepled his fingers. "Tell me, madame, about the last day Miss Everleigh was seen. Did she seem troubled?" Mrs. Atkinson hesitated just long enough for Poirot to notice. "She was quiet, sir. Distracted, perhaps, but not troubled." "Quiet? That is an interesting word." Poirot leaned forward. "Tell me, madame, do you recall anything unusual about that day?" She shifted on her feet. "No, sir. It was an ordinary day. Miss Everleigh returned home in the afternoon and retired to her room. I did not see her after that." "Ah!" Poirot tapped a finger against his chin. "And yet you did not find it strange when she did not ring for her evening tea? A lady of her refinement does not forgo such rituals lightly, n'est-ce pas?" Mrs. Atkinson's lips pressed together. "I assumed she was preparing for the soirée." "Assumed? No, no, madame. That will not do. You are a housekeeper. You do not assume you know." For the first time, Mrs. Atkinson's composed expression faltered. I did not wish to pry, sir." "But you did pry," Poirot said smoothly. "You went to her room, did you not?" Her fingers trembled slightly. "I knocked on her door before retiring. For the night there was no answer, and yet you did not raise the alarm." "I thought she had already left, sir," Mrs. Atkinson exclaimed, her voice defensive. "Miss Everleigh was independent. She often came and went as she pleased." Poirot watched her in silence for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice soft but firm. "You are lying, madame." Mrs. Atkinson's breath caught. I beg your pardon." "You knew she had not left the house," Poirot continued. "You knew something was amiss, and yet you said nothing." Miss Margrave shot forward. "Mrs. Atkinson, if you know something about what happened to Violet, you must tell us." The housekeeper clenched her apron tightly. A heavy silence filled the room. Finally, she exhaled shakily. "There was something," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "A letter." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A letter? Ah, and what did this letter say?" "I don't know." Mrs. Atkinson's hands trembled. "It arrived in the morning, just before Miss Everleigh left for her solicitor's meeting. It was written in a man's hand. I saw the envelope, but she took it at once and said nothing about it." Poirot exchanged a glance with me. "And you have no idea who sent it?" Mrs. Atkinson hesitated. "No, sir, but—" She swallowed hard. Miss Everleigh was unsettled after reading it. That much I could tell." Poirot sat back, his expression thoughtful. "A mysterious letter, a gentleman's cuff-link, a noise in the night. Mon Dieu, this puzzle grows more intriguing by the moment." He rose to his feet, smoothing his waistcoat. "Mademoiselle Margrave, it seems we have our next destination. We must pay a visit to Mr. Griffith, the solicitor. Perhaps he can tell us what business brought Miss Everleigh to him that day." As we prepared to leave, Mrs. Atkinson's voice wavered behind us. "Mr. Poirot." He turned. "Yes, madame." Her eyes were filled with fear. "You must find her before it is too late." Poirot gave a small bow. "That, madame, is precisely what I intend to do." Chapter 5. The Solicitor's Confession. The offices of Griffith & Sons, solicitors, stood on a quiet street in Mayfair, its polished brass name-plate gleaming in the afternoon sun. Poirot and I entered to find a sombre, oak-panelled reception area, where a clerk led us into the office of Mr. Edward Griffith. The solicitor, a stout man in his 50s with greying temples, looked up sharply as we entered. His expression was one of wary surprise. "Monsieur Poirot," he greeted, setting aside a stack of documents. "And Captain Hastings. I presume this visit concerns Miss Everleigh." "Your presumption, Monsieur Griffith, is most astute," Poirot said, settling into a chair. "Tell me, if you please, what business brought Mademoiselle Everleigh to you on the day of her disappearance?" Griffith leaned back, lacing his fingers together. "It was regarding her late father's estate. Miss Everleigh was set to inherit a substantial sum, as you may know." Poirot inclined his head. "And was there any issue with this inheritance?" The solicitor hesitated, then exhaled. "Not an issue exactly, but there was a complication." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah, une complication," Do tell, monsieur. Griffith glanced toward the door, as if ensuring we were alone. Then, lowering his voice, he said, Miss Everly had recently received a claim, an individual who stated he had a rightful interest in the Everly estate. I sat forward. A claim? From whom? Griffith hesitated. A man by the name of Leonard Wexham. He alleged to be the illegitimate son of Miss Everly's father, meaning he could contest her inheritance. Miss Margrave, who had accompanied us, gasped. Impossible. Violet never mentioned this. Griffith sighed. That's because she didn't believe it either. She was furious, in fact. She said it was a ridiculous attempt to extort money, and that she would challenge it in court if necessary. Poirot tapped a finger against his temple. And what do you think, monsieur? Griffith pursed his lips. The claim had no solid legal footing, but Wexham was persistent. He sent a letter the day before Miss Everly visited me, demanding a private meeting with her. Poirot's brows lifted slightly. A letter, mon ami. I straightened. Could this be the same letter Mrs. Atkinson mentioned? Griffith frowned. It's possible. Miss Everly didn't show me the letter, but she was clearly disturbed. When she arrived that morning, she asked me whether there was any way Wexham could force her to meet his demands. And what did you advise her? Poirot asked. That she should ignore him entirely. Wexham had no legal claim, and if he attempted to pursue it, he would be laughed out of court. And how did she respond? Griffith sighed. She was relieved, I think, but she also asked whether Wexham was dangerous. I told her I had no reason to think so. He was simply an opportunist. Poirot drummed his fingers on the armrest. And did she say anything else before she left? Griffith hesitated again. Yes. His voice dropped. She said she might handle the matter herself, that she didn't intend to be threatened by anyone. Poirot and I exchanged a look. One final question, Monsieur Griffith, Poirot said smoothly. Do you know where we might find this Leonard Wexham? The solicitor nodded. He was last staying at the Hotel Cavendish, near Piccadilly. But I warn you, Poirot, he's a slippery man. If Miss Everly went to confront him, I fear it may not have ended well. Poirot stood, adjusting his cuffs. Then, my dear Hastings, we must make haste. It seems we have a certain Monsieur Wexham to meet. Chapter 6. The Man at the Hotel. The Hotel Cavendish was an establishment of quiet elegance, its red brick facade standing proudly amidst the bustle of Piccadilly. As we stepped inside, Poirot's sharp eyes darted around, taking in the polished floors, the gleaming chandeliers, and the air of discreet luxury. Approaching the reception desk, Poirot cleared his throat delicately. Bon après-midi, monsieur. We seek a guest, one Monsieur Leonard Wexham. Might we inquire whether he is in? The receptionist, a thin, balding man with pince-nez glasses, glanced up, his expression carefully neutral. Mr. Wexham? I am afraid he is no longer staying with us. Poirot's brow lifted slightly. Ah bon? And when did he depart? The man hesitated. 2 days ago, sir. He checked out unexpectedly. I frowned. 2 days ago. But that would be the day after Miss Everly's disappearance. Precisely, Hastings, Poirot murmured, his expression unreadable. Turning back to the receptionist, he continued smoothly. Tell me, monsieur, did Monsieur Wexham receive any visitors during his stay? The man hesitated. I'm afraid I couldn't say, sir. Discretion is paramount at the Cavendish. Poirot smiled. Naturally, but perhaps you'll recall if a young lady, elegant, well-dressed, with auburn hair, came to see him 3 nights ago. The man paled slightly. Sir, I really cannot. Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. Ah, mon ami, but you can. You see, this is no mere social call. A young lady has vanished. And if she was here, if she was seen, then that information may be very important indeed. The receptionist swallowed, then gave a small nod. Yes, a woman fitting that description came here. She arrived late, near midnight. My stomach clenched. Midnight? Poirot's expression did not change, but I could see the intensity in his gaze. And did she leave? The receptionist hesitated before shaking his head. I don't know, sir. I never saw her go. A chill passed through me. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. And me, monsieur, he continued. When Monsieur Wexham checked out, did he leave any forwarding address? The man bit his lip, then nodded reluctantly. Only a vague one. He mentioned he was heading out of London. I believe he said something about a manor in Sussex. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A manor, mais oui. He turned to me. Hastings, we must discover which estate in Sussex Monsieur Wexham has taken refuge in. But before that, he turned back to the receptionist. One last question, my friend. When Monsieur Wexham left, did he seem hurried? The man nodded. Yes, sir, very hurried. Poirot gave a satisfied smile. Très bien. Then we must hurry as well. As we stepped outside, Miss Margrave clutched my arm. Poirot, you don't think Violet is still with him, do you? Poirot's face was unreadable. I do not know, mademoiselle, but I do know one thing. Leonard Wexham knows more than he has told, and if he has fled to Sussex, it is there we shall find our next clue. Chapter 7. The manner in the Fogo journey to Sussex was swift but tense. Poirot sat with his hands pressed together, his expression unreadable as the train cut through the English countryside. Miss Margrave, pale and anxious, fidgeted beside me. As we neared our destination, I could no longer contain my impatience. Poirot, do you truly believe Wexham has something to do with Violet's disappearance? Poirot tapped a finger against his temple. Hastings, let us consider the facts. A man with a dubious claim to an inheritance appears. He sends a letter to Mademoiselle Everley, after which she is disturbed. That same evening she vanishes, poof, like smoke in the wind. And the next day, this Wexham flees London in great haste. La, mon ami, it is too much coincidence. And Poirot, he does not believe in coincidence. Miss Margrave shuddered. You think he took her? Poirot's moustache twitched. That, mademoiselle, is what we shall determine. The train pulled into a quiet station, shrouded in an eerie evening mist. We hired a carriage to take us to Blackwood Grange, the manor Wexham was rumoured to be staying in. The road was zouvous, narrow, flanked by towering oak trees, and the heavy fog made the journey feel like something out of a Gothic novel. As the manor came into view, my breath caught. It was an imposing structure, tall and sombre, its stone facade partially obscured by ivy. No lights shone from the windows. The carriage rolled to a stop, and Poirot stepped out, brushing non-existent dust from his coat. Très dramatique, is it not, Hastings? He murmured. We approached the heavy front doors, and Poirot knocked firmly. A long silence followed before footsteps echoed from within. The door creaked open, revealing a gaunt man in a butler's uniform. Yes, his voice was wary. Poirot's eyes swept over him. "We seek Monsieur Leonard Wexam. Is he at home?" The butler hesitated. "Mr. Wexam is not receiving visitors." Poirot smiled pleasantly. "Ah, but I am not just any visitor. Tell him that Hercule Poirot is here, and that I insist upon speaking with him." The butler's lips pressed together, but at last he stepped aside. "Wait here." As he disappeared into the house, I glanced at Poirot. "You think he's really here?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Oh, he is here, Hastings. And if he is not, then something is very, very wrong." A few moments later, hurried footsteps echoed through the grand hallway. A man appeared, a tall figure in his early 40s, his dark hair slightly dishevelled, his expression one of irritation, barely masked by feigned politeness. "Mr. Poirot," he said smoothly, though there was tension in his voice. "To what do I owe this unexpected visit?" Poirot regarded him for a long moment before speaking. "Monsieur Wexam, I have a question for you, a very simple question." Wexam raised an eyebrow. "And that is?" Poirot leaned forward ever so slightly. "Where is Violet Everleigh?" A flicker of something, shock, fear, crossed Wexam's face before he quickly masked it. "I have no idea what you mean," he said coldly. "Miss Everleigh and I have never even met." Poirot smiled, a small knowing smile. "Ah, mais non, monsieur, that is a lie." Chapter 8. The Interrogation of Leonard Wexam. For a moment, the air in the dimly lit hallway was thick with tension. Leonard Wexam stood rigid, his sharp eyes flicking towards the butler, as though calculating his next move. But Poirot, ever unshaken, merely adjusted his cuffs and took a step forward. "No, monsieur," Poirot repeated, "that is a lie, and lies, you see, do not sit well with Hercule Poirot." Wexam scoffed, forcing a chuckle. "You accuse me of lying, yet you have no proof." Poirot's expression remained pleasant. "Mais oui, I have proof enough. You claimed you had never met Mademoiselle Everleigh. Yet the concierge at the hotel, Cavendish, tells us otherwise. He saw a young woman fitting her description arrive late at night 3 nights ago." Wexam's jaw tightened. Poirot continued, his voice smooth as silk. "Furthermore, monsieur, we found this." From his pocket he produced the gold cufflink he had discovered in Violet's room. "An expensive piece, n'est-ce pas? Engraved with the initials L.W. Now, what a strange coincidence that is." A muscle twitched in Wexam's cheek. Miss Margrave, who had thus far remained silent, burst out. "Where is she? What have you done with Violet?" Wexam turned sharply toward her. "I have done nothing to Miss Everleigh." Poirot, however, tilted his head, watching him closely. "Ah, but you did meet her, did you not?" A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Wexam exhaled, running a hand through his dark hair. "Yes, I met her," Miss Margrave gasped. "Then where is she?" Wexam's lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't know." Poirot's sharp gaze did not waver. "Tell us everything, monsieur, from the beginning." Wexam hesitated, then exhaled heavily. "Fine. Violet Everly came to see me at the Cavendish the night she disappeared. She was furious. She called me a fraud, a liar. She told me that if I persisted in making claims to her inheritance, she would have me publicly exposed and prosecuted for extortion. "And what did you say to that?" Poirot asked. "I told her I wasn't after money. I only wanted what was rightfully mine. She didn't believe me. She called me a disgrace to her father's name." Miss Margrave's voice shook. "So you hurt her? I didn't touch her," Wexham snapped, his face flushing. "She stormed out of my hotel room. I assumed she returned home." Poirot narrowed his eyes. "Assumed?" Wexham swallowed. "She left. That's all I know." Poirot studied him in silence. Then, suddenly, he turned toward the butler. "Monsieur, is there a room where we may speak privately?" The butler, who had been hovering anxiously, nodded. "The study, sir." "Très bien. Monsieur Wexham, you will join us." The man hesitated, but finally nodded. Poirot led the way, and as we followed, I couldn't help but feel that the most important revelation of the case was just ahead. Chapter 9. The Truth Beneath the Lies. The study at Blackwood Grange was a grand shadowed room lined with bookshelves, the scent of aged paper and pipe smoke lingering in the air. Poirot took the seat opposite Leonard Wexham, steepling his fingers in thought, while Hastings and Miss Margrave stood near the fireplace, watching in tense silence. Wexham shifted uneasily. "I've already told you. I don't know where Violet Everly is." Poirot tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "You say so, monsieur, but your face betrays you." Wexham scoffed. "You think you can read my thoughts?" "Mais oui." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "It is a matter of psychology. You see, there are those who lie with ease, and those for whom a lie is a great burden. You, monsieur, are not a man accustomed to deception, and so you falter." Wexham's fists clenched. Poirot raised a hand. "Let us retrace, step by step. You say that Mademoiselle Everly left your hotel room that night, but tell me, monsieur, did you watch her go?" Wexham hesitated. "No." "Ah, très intéressant." Poirot leaned forward. "Then how can you be certain she left at all?" Wexham opened his mouth, then shut it again, his face pale. "You see, monsieur, I believe something happened in that hotel room, something that frightened you." Poirot's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Tell me what it was." A long silence. Then Wexham exhaled shakily. "She collapsed." Miss Margrave gasped. Wexham rubbed his temples. "She was angry, so angry. I had never seen anyone so furious. She shouted at me, accused me of being a fraud, and then she just staggered, clutching her chest. She fell to the floor. I thought, God help me, I thought she had died." Poirot's gaze remained sharp. "And what did you do?" Wexham swallowed. "I panicked. I didn't know what to do. If people thought I had hurt her, my claim to the Everly fortune would be destroyed. I called for help." "From whom?" Poirot asked, his voice dangerously calm. Wexham hesitated. "A woman, someone I knew from business dealings." Poirot's expression did not change, but I sensed the sharp shift in his demeanor. "A woman, mon ami. And what was her name?" A muscle in Wexham's jaw twitched. "Lydia Carrow." "Was she Miss Margrave gasped again. Lydia Carrow. She's Violet's former companion, her so-called friend. But Violet dismissed her months ago. She said Lydia was manipulative and untrustworthy. Poirot nodded. Ah, maintenance éclair. He turned back to Wexham. And this Lydia Carrow, what did she do? She took Violet. Wexham's voice was hoarse. She said she had a place, somewhere safe. She told me she'd handle everything. Poirot's moustache twitched. And you let her? Wexham nodded weakly. I let her. Miss Margrave turned to Poirot in horror. But that means Violet could still be alive. Poirot nodded. Précisément. And I believe it is time we paid a visit to this Mademoiselle Lydia Carrow. Chapter 10. The final confrontation. It was well past midnight when we arrived at Lydia Carrow's residence, a small but elegant country house on the outskirts of Sussex. A heavy mist clung to the air, shrouding the estate in an eerie silence. Poirot, with his usual precision, adjusted his cuffs before knocking firmly on the grand oak door. Moments later, the door creaked open, revealing a woman in a midnight blue dressing gown. Lydia Carrow, tall, striking, with sharp, intelligent eyes, gazed at us with cool amusement. Well, well, she murmured. To what do I owe this unexpected visit, Mr. Poirot? Poirot inclined his head. Bonsoir, Mademoiselle Carrow. We have come to discuss Violet Everley. Lydia arched a brow. Violet? What about her? Miss Margrave stepped forward, her voice trembling. Where is she? Lydia's expression did not waver. My dear Felicity, I have no idea what you mean. Poirot studied her intently. Mais non, Mademoiselle Carrow, that is not true. We know you took Miss Everley from the Hotel Cavendish 3 nights ago. Lydia's fingers tightened on the doorframe. I took her to help her, she said smoothly. Violet was unwell. She collapsed. Leonard called me in desperation. What else was I to do? Poirot's eyes gleamed. And so you whisked her away. But where did you take her? Lydia gave a slow smile. Why, here, of course. Miss Margrave gasped. She's here. Lydia let out a soft laugh. She was until earlier today. Poirot's expression sharpened. Explain, s'il vous plaît. Was until earlier today. Poirot's expression sharpened. Explain, s'il vous plaît. Lydia sighed theatrically. Poor Violet. She was so distraught when she came to me. She didn't want to be found, said she needed time to think. So this morning she left, of her own free will. Poirot's moustache twitched. Mademoiselle, I do not believe you. Lydia's smile faltered. Poirot stepped closer, his voice turning steely. I have observed something quite interesting, n'est-ce pas? You are a woman who enjoys control. You manipulate, you deceive. But you do not simply let go of someone as valuable as Violet Everley. Lydia's fingers curled into fists. You make it sound so sinister. Poirot smiled coldly. But it is sinister. For you see, mademoiselle, I noticed something peculiar the moment we arrived. This house, it is silent, too silent. I frowned. What do you mean, Poirot? Poirot turned to me. A house with a guest as important as Miss Everley, should have signs of habitation. A tea set, a book left open, a shawl draped over a chair. But there is nothing. Miss Margrave gasped. You mean? Poirot faced Lydia once more. I do not believe Miss Everley left of her own will. I believe she is still here. A tense silence stretched between them. Then, with a slow smirk, Lydia clapped her hands. "Well done, Poirot. I must say, you live up to your reputation." She turned, and with an elegant flick of her wrist, gestured towards the grand staircase. "Since you're so certain, why don't you see for yourself?" Poirot wasted no time. He ascended the staircase, Miss Margrave and I following closely behind. At the end of the dimly lit corridor, a locked door awaited. Poirot tried the handle. It did not budge. Miss Margrave gasped, "Violet, are you in there?" For a moment there was silence. Then a faint, muffled sound. Poirot's eyes darkened. "Hastings, the door!" Without hesitation, I threw my shoulder against it. The old wood groaned, but did not give. Poirot swiftly retrieved a small lock-picking tool from his coat pocket. With a few deft movements, click, the lock gave way. The door swung open, and there, seated weakly on the edge of a canopy bed, was Violet Everley. Miss Margrave let out a strangled cry. "Violet!" Violet's pale face lifted, her eyes glassy with confusion. "Felicity!" Her voice was hoarse. Poirot hurried forward, examining her closely. "Mon Dieu! She has been drugged!" Miss Margrave rushed to her cousin's side. "Violet, what did she do to you?" Violet's eyes fluttered. She wouldn't let me leave. She said I had to stay quiet, that the world believed I had run away." Poirot turned sharply to Lydia Caro, who leaned against the doorway, utterly unrepentant. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said coldly, "you have played a dangerous game, and now it is over." Mitchell. Justice and reflection. The morning sun cast long golden streaks over the Sussex countryside as we sat in the grand drawing-room of Blackwood Grange. The police inspector, having been summoned promptly after our discovery of Violet, had taken Lydia Caro into custody. Violet, recovering from the effects of her captivity, sat with Miss Margrave, gripping her cousin's hand tightly. Poirot stood before the fireplace, his arms folded. "It was most ingenious, was it not?" he mused. Lydia Caro wished for Violet to disappear, but not forever. If Violet had been declared missing for long enough, Lydia could have found a way to control her fortune. Miss Margrave's face darkened. "So it was all about money?" Poirot nodded. "Toujours, mademoiselle. Always." I frowned. "But Poirot, why didn't Wrexham say anything sooner?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "Because he was a coward, Hastings. He feared the repercussions of his own involvement, and so he let events unfold until Poirot arrived to untangle them." Miss Margrave turned to Poirot. Her eyes filled with gratitude. "Mr. Poirot, you have saved my cousin's life. How can we ever thank you?" Poirot smiled modestly, smoothing his cuffs. "It is thanks enough, mademoiselle, to see justice done." As the carriage pulled away from Blackwood Grange, taking us back to London, Poirot leaned back with a contented sigh. "Hastings," he murmured, "once again the little grey cells have triumphed." I chuckled. "That they have, Poirot." He adjusted his cuffs, a small smile playing on his lips. "And of course, everything is in perfect order once more." With that, he closed his eyes, content in the knowledge that another mystery had been solved. Chapter 11. Poirot's Final Puzzle. As our carriage rolled through the winding country roads back to London, Poirot remained deep in thought. His fingers drummed lightly on his knee, his sharp eyes fixed on the misty landscape beyond the window. I, feeling rather satisfied with the outcome of the case, leaned back with a contented sigh. "Well, Poirot," I said, "this must be one of your most satisfying victories yet. The villain is apprehended, the innocent lady rescued, justice well and truly served." Poirot's moustache twitched, but he did not reply immediately. Instead, he turned his gaze toward Violet Everley, who sat quietly, still pale but recovering from her ordeal. Miss Margrave held her cousin's hand, offering reassuring whispers. Then, at last, Poirot spoke. His voice was calm, deliberate. "Something remains, Hastings. One final question." I sat up. "A question? But everything is settled, surely." Poirot steepled his fingers. "Mademoiselle Everley," he said, turning to Violet, "there is something you have not told us." Violet blinked in confusion. What do you mean, Mr. Poirot?" Poirot's gaze did not waver. "Mademoiselle Caro kept you captive, but she did not intend to keep you forever. She was waiting, but waiting for what? What was her plan?" Violet hesitated, as though dredging up a memory just beyond reach. She said the world thought I had run away, that it wouldn't be long before no one would come looking for me anymore. Poirot nodded. "Exactement. And then Violet swallowed. She said I would have no choice but to trust her." Miss Margrave frowned. "That makes no sense. Violet, she wanted to control you, not befriend you." Miss Margrave let out a strangled cry. "Violet!" Violet's pale face lifted, her eyes glassy with confusion. "Felicity!" Her voice was hoarse. Poirot hurried forward, examining her closely. "Mon Dieu! She has been drugged!" Miss Margrave rushed to her cousin's side. "Violet, what did she do to you?" Violet's eyes fluttered. She wouldn't let me leave. She said I had to stay quiet, that the world believed I had run away." Poirot turned sharply to Lydia Caro, who leaned against the doorway, utterly unrepentant. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said coldly, "you have played a dangerous game, and now it is over. Métaux." Justice and reflection, the morning sun cast long golden streaks over the Sussex countryside as we sat in the grand drawing-room of Blackwood Grange. The police inspector, having been summoned promptly after our discovery of Violet, had taken Lydia Caro into custody. Violet, recovering from the effects of her captivity, sat with Miss Margrave, gripping her cousin's hand tightly. Poirot stood before the fireplace, his arms folded. "It was most ingenious, was it not?" he mused. Lydia Caro wished for Violet to disappear, but not forever. If Violet had been declared missing for long enough, Lydia could have found a way to control her fortune. Miss Margrave's face darkened. So it was all about money. Poirot nodded. "Toujours, mademoiselle, always." I frowned. "But Poirot, why didn't Wrexham say anything sooner?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "Because he was a coward, Hastings. He feared the repercussions of his own involvement, and so he let events unfold until Poirot arrived to untangle them." Miss Margrave turned to Poirot, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Mr. Poirot, you have saved my cousin's life. How can we ever thank you?" Poirot smiled modestly, smoothing his cuffs. "It is thanks enough, mademoiselle, to see justice done, As the carriage pulled away from Blackwood Grange, taking us back to London, Poirot leaned back with a contented sigh. "Hastings," he murmured, "once again the little grey cells have triumphed." I chuckled. "That they have, Poirot." He adjusted his cuffs, a small smile playing on his lips. "And of course, everything is in perfect order once more." With that, he closed his eyes, content in the knowledge that another mystery had been solved. Chapter 11. Poirot's Final Puzzle. As our carriage rolled through the winding country roads back to London, Poirot remained deep in thought. His fingers drummed lightly on his knee, his sharp eyes fixed on the misty landscape beyond the window. I, feeling rather satisfied with the outcome of the case, leaned back with a contented sigh. "Well, Poirot," I said, "this must be one of your most satisfying victories yet. The villainess apprehended, the innocent lady rescued. Justice well and truly served." Poirot's moustache twitched, but he did not reply immediately. Instead, he turned his gaze toward Violet Everley, who sat quietly, still pale but recovering. From her ordeal, Miss Margrave held her cousin's hand, offering reassuring whispers. Then, at last, Poirot spoke. His voice was calm, deliberate. "Something remains, Hastings. One final question." I sat up. "A question? But everything is settled, surely." Poirot steepled his fingers. "Mademoiselle Everley," he said, turning to Violet, "there is something you have not told us." Violet blinked in confusion. What do you mean, Mr. Poirot?" Poirot's gaze did not waver. "Mademoiselle Caro kept you captive, oui, but she did not intend to keep you forever. She was waiting. But waiting for what? What was her plan?" Violet hesitated, as though dredging up a memory just beyond reach. She said the world thought I had run away, that it wouldn't be long before no one would come looking for me any more." Poirot nodded. "Exactement. And then Violet swallowed. She said I would have no choice but to trust her." Miss Margrave frowned. "That makes no sense. Violet, she wanted to control you, not befriend you." She took a deep breath. "Lydia Caro, what was her end game? You said she was only following Griffith's orders, but why would she risk everything for him?" Poirot gave a small, knowing smile. "Because, mademoiselle, she loved him." Hush fell over the room. Poirot sipped his tea before continuing. "Oui, Lydia Caro, for all her cruelty, was not driven purely by greed. She believed that Edward Griffith would reward her loyalty, perhaps even make her his wife once his plans were complete. But of course, such men do not share power. He would have cast her aside the moment he no longer needed her." Miss Margrave shivered. "And she would have done all that for a man who would betray her?" Poirot sighed. "L'amour, mademoiselle. It makes fools of us all." Violet sat back, shaking her head. "I will never understand people like them." Poirot smiled gently. "Then, mademoiselle, you are fortunate indeed." She reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "You are a remarkable man, Mr. Poirot." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Naturellement. But do not forget, without Hastings here to serve as my faithful chronicler, how would the world ever know of my brilliance?" I laughed. "Oh, Poirot, you do love your theatrics." Poirot adjusted his cuffs. "Hastings, mon ami, it is not theatrics. It is simply the truth." We all laughed, and for the first time in weeks, the shadow of Violet's ordeal seemed to lift. As she and Miss Margrave bid us farewell and stepped into the waiting carriage, Poirot leaned back, watching them disappear down the street. "Hastings," he murmured, "I do believe we have earned a holiday." I grinned. "A holiday? Surely you'll grow restless without a case to solve." "Holiday. Surely you'll grow restless without a case to solve." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Perhaps. But until then, let us enjoy the order and peace that has been restored." He lifted his tea, smiling in quiet satisfaction. And now, all was as it should be. Chapter 14. The final twist. It had been a week since Edward Griffith's arrest, and life had returned to its usual quiet rhythm. Poirot, ever the creature of habit, busied himself with his morning routine. The precise trimming of his moustache, the careful arrangement of his breakfast, the meticulous folding of his newspaper. He, on the other hand, was restless. "Well, Poirot," I said, pacing the room, "it seems we have wrapped up the case nicely, but I can't shake the feeling that there's something unfinished." Poirot arched a delicate brow. "Unfinished, Hastings? But no. The culprit has been apprehended, the inheritance restored, and Mademoiselle Everly is safe." I sighed. Yes, but something about Lydia Carrow's behavior still bothers me. You said she was in love with Griffith, but what if that wasn't her endgame at all? Poirot's fingers paused over his teacup. "Ah, a most interesting thought, Hastings." At that very moment the post arrived. Poirot took the stack of letters, and with great care sorted them into two neat piles, important and nonsense. But as he reached the last envelope, he stopped. His eyes narrowed. "Hastings," he murmured, tapping the envelope lightly, "this is unexpected." I leaned over. It was a plain white envelope, unmarked except for one thing, a single violet flower pressed into the wax seal. Poirot broke the seal with deliberate slowness and unfolded the letter inside. His eyes moved swiftly over the words, and for the first time since the case ended, I saw his expression darken. "What is it, Poirot?" I asked, my voice tight with concern. Without a word, he handed me the letter. "Poirot, you may have won this round, but you are mistaken if you believe this is over. Do not be so naive as to think that Griffith worked alone. He was merely a piece on the board, just as I was. The true mastermind remains unseen. Enjoy your victory while you can." A chill ran down my spine. Poirot. She escaped. Poirot's face remained unreadable. "It would seem so, Hastings." I stared at him. But then, if Griffith wasn't the true villain, then who was? Poirot folded the letter neatly and placed it in his pocket. Then, smoothing his waistcoat, he looked out the window, his expression grave yet thoughtful. "That, Hastings," he murmured, "is a puzzle for another day." The streets of London stretched before us, busy and bustling as ever. But somewhere, hidden in the shadows, a greater mystery was waiting to unfold. Poirot smiled to himself, ever so slightly, and the game was far from over. Chapter 15. The Shadow in the Fog. The letter from Lydia Carrow lingered in my mind long after Poirot had folded it neatly into his pocket. The idea that Griffith had merely been a pawn in a larger scheme sent a shiver through me. I watched Poirot as he stood by the window, his expression unreadable. "Poirot," I said cautiously. You don't seem surprised. Poirot's lips curled into the faintest of smiles. Mais non, mon ami. I am never surprised, only enlightened. I frowned. Then you suspected all along that Griffith wasn't working alone? Poirot turned to me. Bien sûr. There were too many conveniences in this case, Hastings. Consider, Griffith altered the inheritance, but his plan was crude, reckless, too obvious for a man of his reputation. And Lydia Caro? A clever manipulator, yes, but she lacks the grand ambition to orchestrate such a deception. No, no, my friend. Someone far more calculating was behind it all. Miss Margrave, who had arrived just in time to hear this, gasped. But who? Who else would have a reason to deceive Violet? Poirot's fingers drummed against the desk. That, mademoiselle, is the question. Just then, there was a sharp knock at the door. Poirot's eyes flickered with interest before he straightened his tie and called, "Enter." The door swung open, and to my astonishment, in walked Violet Everly. She was dressed in mourning attire, a black veil draped over her delicate features. But something was different. The timid, shaken woman we had rescued was gone. In her place stood someone poised, controlled. "Miss Everly!" I exclaimed. "What on earth?" She raised a hand. "Mr. Poirot, I need your help once more." Poirot bowed slightly. "Mademoiselle, I am always at your service." She hesitated, then reached into the folds of her cloak and withdrew a second letter. Poirot took it with great care, unfolding the parchment. His sharp eyes skimmed the contents before he let out a soft, approving hum. "Ah, c'est magnifique!" He turned to us with a gleam in his eye. "And so, Hastings, the true game begins." I gaped at him. "What does it say?" Poirot smiled ever so slightly. "It says, the past is not buried, and neither is the truth. If you wish to find the real villain, look not to the present, but to the past. The Everly name hides many secrets. Some are better left undisturbed." A heavy silence settled over the room. Miss Margrave's voice wavered. "You mean the real culprit is still out there?" Poirot's gaze flickered toward Violet. "Tell me, Mademoiselle Everly, before your father died, did he ever mention an enemy? A name that unsettled him?" Violet's lips parted. She hesitated. Then, almost in a whisper, she murmured, "Yes. He spoke of someone who had returned, a name I have never forgotten." Poirot inclined his head. "And what was this name, mademoiselle?" Violet's voice trembled as she answered, "Sebastian Fontaine." The room fell deathly still. Poirot clasped his hands together. "Enfin, now the real mystery begins." Outside, the streets of London hummed with life. But in the shadows, a greater secret was waiting to be uncovered, and Hercule Poirot would not rest until it was solved. Durtengiund.